Welcome to the Morning Momentum this Thursday morning, where we are ready to give you insightful analysis into the top stories that are making the headlines this morning. As usual, this is a daily compendium of local and international news, human interest stories, current affairs, and expert opinion. Let's set the ball rolling with the Standard newspaper. Shock cabinet reshuffle, the losers and winners. President William Ruto yesterday shuffled his cabinet, a move that saw the vocal Moses Kuria pushed from the Trade Ministry to that of Public Service. Mudavadi, the biggest winner in the reshuffle, adds Foreign and Diaspora Affairs to his docket as Alfred Mutua moves to Tourism. The president also appointed ambassadors as he moved principal secretaries. Now we have the winners: Musalia Mudavadi, PSC Foreign Affairs, and Alice Wahome from Water to Lands. On the contrary, the losers, we have Alfred Mutua from Foreign Affairs to Tourism, and Moses Kuria from Trade to Public Service. That story is beefed up for you on page 10 of the Standard this morning. On page 7, death, destruction in wake of fresh Sondu clashes. We'll also take a look at that story. On other news, greed is making government hurt Kenyans. In an exclusive interview, Azimio leader Raila Odinga opens up on his decision to take a backseat amid mirrored governance issues and says since the current regime is a product of corruption, the country should brace for a rough ride. He also feels government is chasing investors through direct competition. That story is beefed up for you on page 2 and page 3. National news, Hope as World Health Organization okays second malaria vaccine. That story is beefed up for you on page 12. In sports news, same old United, Devils stumble again. That story is beefed up for you on page 40. In business news, UAE firm to take over Telcom. That story is beefed up for you on page 22. Let's take a look at page 2. Graft and greed hurting Kenyans, sending investors to other countries. The opposition leader says time for change in law is now, says dialogue will give way forward. Azimio leader terms Gachagua as tragedy, says he acts like a DP for Mount Kenya region only. That story is beefed up for you on page 2. On page 3, stop campaigns and work. Raila tells Ruto, the former prime minister tells president to learn from Kibaki and not to spend time meeting leaders. Azimio says Ruto's mission to Haiti is a misplaced priority and Wananchi have nothing to gain. That story is beefed up on for you on page 3. On page 4, referendum looms after 2 weeks of stakeholders' proposals on talks. 2 of 5 thematic areas that various stakeholders deliberated on require a popular vote. Creating positions of official opposition leader and entrenching post of prime CS requires a referendum. That story is beefed up for you on page 4. Let's take a look at page 6. Former hospital worker at Center of Child Theft, Ring jailed for 25 years. Fred Leparan also sentenced to 10 years community service after completing sentence. His co-accused Selina Award ordered to pay 300,000 shillings fine or serve 2 years in jail. That story is beefed up for you on page 6. On page 7, Ruto tours Nyanza as border attacks erupt. 6 people have been killed at the Kisumu-Kericho border in the last 2 months. Criminals are taking advantage of traditional border dispute to steal cattle. That story is beefed up for you on page 7. Let's take a look at page 10. Ruto reshuffles cabinet. Kuria and Mutua moved. Mudavadi's docket has been expanded to include foreign affairs and diaspora affairs. Dr. Mutua has been moved to the tourism docket. Now, Aisha Jumwa has moved to the Ministry of Gender, Culture and Arts and Heritage. On the other side, Rebecca Miano is the new Investment, Trade and Industry Cabinet Secretary, replacing Moses Kuria. Penina Malonza has moved to the Ministry of East African Community, the ESOS and Regional Development. Zakaria Njeru is the new Water, Sanitation and Irrigation CS. That story is beefed up for you on page 10. Trade, Kabarak and Strathmore to train small-scale traders. Kabarak and Strathmore universities have partnered to build the capacity of small business operators through advisory services and training. That story is beefed up for you on page 10 as well. Let's take a look at page 12. Hope in fight against malaria as the World Health Organization approves another vaccine. Data shows the disease kills about 500,000 children in Africa each year. Gavi says R21 Matrix will be rolled out in Africa as early as mid next year. That story is beefed up for you on page 12 of the Standard this morning. On page 13, family wants state to reveal killer British soldier who took their girl. Family wants Kenyan and UK governments compelled to name the suspect killer. They say 11 years later, there has been no closure on the matter and accuse authorities of cover-up. You can catch up with that story on page 13 when you grab your copy of the Standard this morning. Let's take a look at page 15. Should Kenya police officers be sent to Haiti? Now, we have Shalom Godfrey who says, yes, let us help this troubled nation. On the contrary, Robert Mudigani says, no, let us fix rampant crime at home. That story is beefed up for you on page 15. Let's take a look at another expert opinion. Time is running out fast for quirks in real estate sector. Walking or driving around Nairobi, you will be greeted by "this property is not for sale" or "buyer beware" signs almost everywhere you turn. From affluent neighborhoods like Lavington, Runda, and Westlands to low-income estates such as Kawangware and Mwihoko, property owners seem to fear that their plots may be sold anytime by unknown people without their knowledge. That story is beefed up for you on page 16. Let's take a look at business news inside the Standard this morning. Huge rules out new sovereign bond as 296 billion payment nears. CBK cites the volatile global credit market for its decision to shun the issuance of another Eurobond amid concerns of a possible default. Government will instead turn to IMF and world borrowing to pay the bond maturing in June 2024. That story is beefed up for you on page 20. Let's move on to some other news. There is also the real estate article for those who love real estate stuffs. It's beefed up for you on page 26, 27, and page 28. Let's now take a look at international news inside the Standard this morning. Unfortunately, there is no international news, so we take a look at sports news. Bankers too good for KPC reclaim title. The Bankers beat the Oilers 3-1 to win national volleyball title at Kasarani yesterday. KPA qualified for the Africa Club Championship for the third year in a row. That story is beefed up for you on page 37. Let's take a look at page 38. Italy reset for France tomorrow after freak New Zealand defeat. Winger Paolo Odogu hoping to capitalize on their familiarity with the hosts to upset them. The two sides face off in a decisive Group A Rugby World Cup match. That story is beefed up for you on page 38. Also, SportPesa MJ bonus winner now bets on Gor Mahia. The 94th Mashemeji Derby pitting arch rivals Gor Mahia FC against AFC Leopards. SC is just around the corner and football enthusiasts are already excited. That story is beefed up for you on page 38. Let's take a look at page 39. Jeff Kosgei promises an exciting and enjoyable race in Chicago. Kenyan women Joycelyn Jepkosgei, defending champion Ruth Chepngetich, and Stacey Ndiwa are eyeing glory in Chicago. London Marathon champion Kelvin Kiptum will be leading the men's charges this Sunday. That story is also beefed up for you on page 39. Still on page 39, Champions League, double tragedy for Arsenal as Saka suffers injury in Lens loss. Michael Arteta said Bukayo Saka's latest injury is a worry, but does not regret picking him to play in Arsenal's 2-1 Champions League defeat at Lens on Tuesday night. That story is beefed up for you on page 39. Let's take a look at the cover page. Same old United. Red Devils woes continue. Manchester United suffered a stunning 3-2 defeat to Galatasaray in the Champions League. Erik ten Hag faces more questions as he hopes to back the trend. You can catch up with that story of Manchester United on the cover page. With that same old United story, we take a quick break and then we come back with the top stories making the headlines inside the Daily Nation.
Imagine waking up to a show every morning that entertains, educates,
that keeps you glued to the screen with interesting topics. Talk about health, fashion, business, fitness, and spiritual nourishment. Whether you're enjoying your cup of coffee, tea, milk, or uji, Younib Breakfast Show is the place to be. Every Tuesday and Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. with me, Penina Washara, here on Younib TV.
Welcome back to the Morning Momentum. If you are just joining us, you can continue interacting with us via our social media platforms at Younib_TV on Instagram, Younib Media TV on Facebook, and on YouTube. Let's take a look at the top stories inside the Daily Nation this morning. Musalia'S big win. The principal secretaries and ambassadors also affected. It's all about the cabinet reshuffle. Now, changes. President William Ruto yesterday created a new ministry as he made his first cabinet reshuffle that elevated Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi by handing him the influential Foreign Affairs docket. CSS Moses Kuria and Alice Wahome, who had courted controversy in their previous positions, were among those who were moved as the head of state reorganized his government by shifting functions and reconstituting some ministries. That story is beefed up for you on page 4 and page 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. Response: I didn't pay myself, Chiloba says in CA mortgage saga. while denying that he was both seller and buyer in the 25 million mortgage saga that got him suspended as CA boss. He accuses the authorities board of punishing him unheard. That story is beefed up for you on page 8. Also on page 7, Dubai farm to get Helios Telecom's stake. A United Arab Emirates-based firm will take up the majority stake in Telecom Kenya from London's Helios Investment Partners, marking the latest twist in the telco. We'll take a look at that story. Also on page 3, social worker to spend 35 years in jail for child theft. That story is also on page 3. Let's take a look at page 2. Teachers' pain and unfailing hope amid shortages in sector. Government commended for hiring more teachers to bridge the gap. Today, marking the World Teachers Day. That story is beefed up for you on page 2. On page 3, social worker who trafficked children sentenced to 35 years. Leparan will serve 25 years in prison, while the rest will be served under probation. Magistrate says the accused took advantage of the children instead of protecting them as expected. That story is beefed up for you on page 3. Let's take a look at page 4. The cabinet reshuffle. Mudavadi big winner as Ruto makes changes to the executive. The president did not drop any cabinet secretaries in the changes, opting instead to transfer functions and reconstitute ministries. A number of principal secretaries, ambassadors and deputy ambassadors were also affected. Kuria among those moved as he loses key trade docket to Rebecca Miano. That story is beefed up for you on page 4 and page 5. On page 6, we don't trust to preside over law reforms. That is Azimio. President's Kenya Kwanza Brigade has rejected calls for a referendum, preferring a parliamentary process. That story is beefed up for you on page 6. Opposition cites Ruto's history of opposing constitutional changes as a reason for doubt. Let's take a look at page 7. UAE-based company gets majority shares in Telcom after Helios exit. Helios will have to refund 6.9 billion to state, directly sell its 60% stake to ICA. Treasury said it had settled on Infrastructure Corporation of Africa, LLC, to be the new majority shareholder. That story is beefed up for you on page 7. Let's take a look at page 8. I did not pay myself for own mortgaged house, says Chiloba. Director General suspended pending investigations as CA boss denied being both seller and buyer in the mortgage loan. That story is beefed up for you on page 8. Let's take a look at page 10. 5 tests but no results in Eregi girl's misery illness. More samples have been sent to Kenya Medical Research Institute. 5 tests have been conducted so far and no pathogens have been identified. That story is beefed up for you on page 10. In other news, unknown number killed in several road crashes on Nairobi's southern bypass. An unknown number of people were killed in several road accidents on Nairobi's southern bypass yesterday, even as Transport CS Kipchumba Murkomen asked motorists to observe speed limits and slow down where there are ongoing maintenance works. That story is beefed up for you on page 10. Let's take a look at page 12. Kenya first Africa on e-infrastructure. Poor e-infrastructure hurts the life of citizens, especially at the time when most services are moving online. Analysis of 121 countries have found that 52 of them have a below average e-infrastructure index. That story is beefed up for you on page 12. Let's move on to page 14 and we take a look at the expert opinion. Minding teachers will give us the education we want. Those are sentiments by Susan Hopgood as we mark the World Teachers Day. And I quote, "The future rests with our teachers. Stand with us. Ensure they are central figures in dialogues and decisions." That story is beefed up for you on page 14. Also on page 15, Why army chief is snooping around. How long India's velvet glove will clock its fist of power could be answered on an East African street in the not too distant future. Those are sentiments by Charles Onyango Obo. What others say. You can catch up with that story on page 15. Let's shift gears to county news now, and we start with Kajiado. Lenku given 60 days to turn around water farm. Governor blames lack of board of directors for poor performance. That story is beefed up for you on page 17. We move on to Mombasa County. Owners of idle land to work with the county on squatters. Governor Abdul Swamad Nasir has urged absentee land owners to engage his administration on how to settle squatters and end land tussles. Briefly, in Nairobi County, man arrested after gang attack. In Isiolo County, appeal for help to move families. Authorities are concerned by reluctance of over 400 households in Iresaboru sub-county to move to safer places ahead of the El Nino rains. In Tana River, showdown looms over chief officers. A showdown looms after Governor Dado Godana announced his chief officers and nominees. That story is also beefed up for you on page 17. On page 18 and page 19, it's all about the Maralal International Camel Derby. You can catch up with that story on page 18 and page 19. For the property lovers, you have the DN2 article, applying for a loan for your first home. That story is also on page 22 and page 23 of the DN2 article. It's all about the ultimate guide when taking the first home loan. In other news about the World Teachers Day, empowered TVET trainers and robust industrial linkages key to government achieving its industrialization agenda. That story is beefed up for you on page 24. On page 25, retooling trainers in collaboration with industry. Now, the teachers we need for the education we want. The global imperative to reverse the teacher shortage. That is the theme for this year's World Teachers Day. With that story, now we take a look at the international news. The U.S. Congress stand by Speaker's removal. Hardliners tried to block McCarthy from getting job in January, forcing him to go through 15 rounds of votes. Fratricide maneuver lays bare the chaotic levels of infighting among the Republicans. That story is beefed up for you on page 27. Global warning, NGOs urge G20 to move fast on combating effects of climate change. That story is also beefed up for you on page 27. Briefly, in international news, in Kampala, Uganda, former fighters to get amnesty. Uganda has begun the process to grant amnesty to 46 former fighters of the Lord's Resistance Army patriated from the Central African Republic. In Khartoum, Ethiopia, the Ethiopia embassy in Sudan shelled. The Sudanese army and the RSF have blamed each other for the bombing of the Ethiopian embassy in Khartoum. In London, a varsity to offer degree in magic. A degree in magic being offered in 2024 will be one of the first in the UK. The University of Exeter says the MA in Magic and Occult Science has been created following a recent surge in interest in magic. The coast leader said. That story is beefed up for you on page 27 as well. It's now that time that we take a look at business news. The top story, pensions manager calls for single tax to triple revenues. Collapsing levies into one the way to go, says the financial firm. In other news, Brookside banks on high yield fodder to up output. That story is also beefed up for you on page 28. In numbers, 6.25 trillion of shillings envisaged in new system of tax collection. That story is beefed up for you on page 28. Now, let's take a look at sports news inside the Daily Nation this morning. And we start with The volleyball. Astute Kenya prisons lock men's crown. The KCB women's champions after 15 years. Wardens secure league title. They last won in 2016 with Assured Kasarani Show. That story is beefed up for you on page 40. Also, Kericho Stadium upgrade will be done by October 14th. The Kericho Green Stadium is undergoing a major upgrade ahead of the 60th Mashujaa Day celebrations that will be staged at the venue on October 20th. That story is beefed up for you on page 40. On page 41, brilliant Jepchirchir next eyes New York Marathon title. Fresh from retaining women's world half marathon crown, Olympic champ says she is now free of injuries. That story is beefed up for you on page 41. Let's take a look at page 42. Vihiga bullets incident raises fresh fears over match fixing. Lack of law criminalizing manipulation of matches blamed for surge in match fixing cases. On Sunday, Coach Owoko arrested a suspect targeting the team's players in Mumias. That story is beefed up for you on page 42. On page 43, Riga exploits show Kenya is still a force to reckon with in athletics. These are sentiments by Barnaba Korir, and I quote, "This initiative is not only open to elite athletes, but the upcoming ones as well." That story is beefed up for you on page 43. Let's take a look at the cover page of the Daily Nation this morning. KDF to fully exit Somalia next year, says Duale. Somalia government has requested second phase of troops withdrawal be delayed by 3 months. The defense CS declines to reveal total number of soldiers killed in the ongoing mission. That story is beefed up for you on the cover page of the Daily Nation. With that story of KDF soldiers exiting Somalia, we come to an end of today's session of the Morning Momentum. Thank you so much for choosing to stay with Younib TV, and to all those who made this broadcast a success, we also extend our heartfelt gratitude. Thanks to Anifa Kavira, the Chief Controller, and see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Until then, do have a beautiful Thursday.